Greetings, everyone out there, and welcome to Oursstudio podcast, where we stream your podcast and you live in ours. Today is a very, 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 very special day. Ooh, I got somebody here with me, N1D Lawson, and it's going to be a great first episode. Look, today's message is about courage and perseverance, right? So I want y'all to think about this. I am your host, Eric Roberts, better known as ATL EROB. And you know my slogan is always, I believe in me, and I believe in you. So I want y'all to think about this right now. Think about as if we were ghosts, right? Think about that phrase. I just want you to let it simmer. Let it simmer real quick, okay? So, As If We Were Ghosts is our first season. We are shooting that right now live with N1D Lawson. So, with this season here, we are going to give y'all the real, okay? You hear me? Since the beginning of time, black people in this nation have fought for rights from sports to entertainment to film. The whole nine. We built a lot of infrastructure that's going on now. But unfortunately, right, N1D? Unfortunately, sometimes our voices, even though we're making strides, is still not heard like we want it to be heard. We're making strides and we will make strides moving forward. So I am here once again with N1D Lawson, and I'm going to pass it over to her and let her introduce herself. But before I do that, once again, this show is sponsored by Oursstudio and EROBTV, and you can follow me at ATL_EROB, and you will see this first episode on Oursstudio and EROBTV platforms. So here we have N1D Lawson.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the invitation,
Oh.
especially to this inaugural podcast. You know, you gave a great introduction there to what As If We Were Ghosts is all about. We're in our first season, which has to do with the segregated athletic leagues here in Georgia. Many people don't know that even all the way down to not only schools, but who can play sports against each other.
Wow.
Until relatively recently, there were black leagues and then there were white leagues.
Wow.
And so in many cases, those that came through and were able to go to colleges and go into the pros from the white schools, they actually had learned a lot of what eventually made them great in basketball, football, baseball, from black players.
Wow.
So As If We Were Ghosts chronicles this history of these athletic leagues and these black athletes that actually made their mark. And I was thinking about in your introduction, you said, you know, African Americans have contributed a lot to infrastructure. I would say have contributed everything to infrastructure.
Everything.
There isn't any. There is no United States if it is not for African people who are enslaved and build everything, the entire economy as we know it today, the entire education system. You know, the first public education system comes about because black people began establishing schools right after the period of enslavement.
Wow.
And only because they're doing this do white-run governments begin to say, oh, we should also offer public education for our students, right?
Come on now.
So there's a whole range of things that we can talk about in terms of As If We Were Ghosts, where you kind of blow the history of people as if it doesn't make any difference, right?
Right.
But it makes all the difference.
Right. So and Wendy, tell the people like what was your role in As If We Were Ghosts, right? So I know, let me tell y'all real quick about N1D, right? So I didn't tell y'all this. She is an award-winning producer. She did it at reporting as well, right? She does it all, y'all, and she's just a beast at what she do. So if I'm not mistaken, you are the producer behind As If We Were Ghosts.
I am. And,
Right.
you know, this story actually takes us back a long time, but, you know, before many of you were thinking about production. But 2007.
She trying to call us young.
You are young, and it's good. I'm so happy to see young people in the business. But, you know, back in 2007, I was working with Georgia Public Broadcasting, and one of the members of the underwriting or the sales staff there, a white gentleman, came to me and told me this story. He told me the story because he himself had formerly played for the Atlanta Hawks. He had gone to the University of Georgia. But he told me about how black players in downtown Decatur had taught the players up the hill a lot of what they actually went on and used in college and used in the pros. So he wanted to try to tell these stories because he didn't think it was fair. These black players, in many cases, had been barred from the right to higher education. All the education was segregated, so they could not go go to the University of Georgia. And so As If We Were Ghosts was actually born from that. Now, many things happened through the years and it didn't move forward at that particular time, but then Ron Bivens came along just in the last few months and kind of revived the project. So
Right. And we'll definitely, y'all definitely see Ron coming soon. So Herb White, that's beautiful you said that, because I want to say, a lot of times I feel like through history, it was some white counterparts that stood up and had a voice and kind of, I feel like throughout history, it was always like, we didn't have nobody that had tried to stand up, So you could say that Herb did kind of try to fight in a sense.
Well, Herb introduced me to the story. I would, as a producer, I have a range of experiences. I study many things and I learn about them, but also people bring stories to my attention.
Got you, okay.
And he brought I had no idea that there were these segregated athletic leagues here.
And that's a beautiful thing. So like for upcoming producers and things at the house, let me ask you this, like when you get your inspiration from, is it usually you get your inspiration when you talk to people for your stories, or is it more like a brainstorming of thinking what you went through in life and bringing that to life on camera? Like, what is your standpoint from like starting those productions and stuff like that?
Well, I think it's a range, and I have more than 30 years experience producing. So
you look good, girl. 30 years.
Thank you, my brother. But
30 years. I thought you were 30 years old.
Yeah, he's trying to butter me up. But in I came to CNN in 1992 is how I got to Atlanta. So I've been around for a while, exactly. So in any case, what I would say though to up and coming producers is it's a range of things. You should be reading a lot. You should be studying a lot, because actually a lot of people are like, I'm just going to tell my story. And that's interesting. And that actually kind of has its roots in our current social media climate, where, you take a picture of yourself, you put it on, you take a picture of your food, you put it on, and people like it. But actually, true storytelling is a combination of what you have experienced, but when it becomes broad and deep, it's also what you have studied.
Wow.
So, I don't have to only tell stories about myself. That's a, pretty short bank of things that I want to do. But my experience shapes how the story is told. So, I grew up in a Pan-African community in California. Wow. So the study of history, having grandparents that lived in East Africa and getting a chance to spend time in many different countries, including African countries, these shape my production values. But I have to keep studying. I have to keep paying attention.
Every day you always study.
Every day, every single day. And that's how these stories come about.
Is it anybody that you feel like in this documentary that the people at the house, like I know you can't give all the details, it's not out yet, but is it somebody that the people at the house would be like, ooh, they're in there too, I gotta go watch this? Like, who's somebody that you can kind of name drop?
Well, I'll just say this. The first of the major interviews we recorded back in 2007 was Walt Frazier.
Oh, wow.
So hopefully, I know some people might be very young, but hopefully if you have to Google it,
you
know who Walt Frazier is.
You gotta know Walt Frazier. If you're a sports head, you gotta know Walt.
Yeah.
You have to.
So back in 2007, I reached out to Walt, and he was gracious enough to meet me at Madison Square Garden. So I went up to New York and was able to meet him. And I'll just tell you, it was really funny. I'm looking out, and I'm expecting to see a limo pull up with Walt, and I don't see anything. Suddenly coming up the escalator for the subway, wearing that lovely satin pink shirt with a medallion on. Here comes, and I knew right away that was him. But the interview is wonderful. He had just written a book at that particular time, and we talked a lot about the things that he was saying. The need, he said, for black men to generate a sense of spirituality. At one point, he said, you must learn to worship something, even if it is a rock.
Wow, that's deep. And I'm glad you touched on that, because I feel like this is like the black community has more trauma than any other community, because it's like, even with your documentary that you're producing, As If We Were Ghosts, see, it's okay. You can accomplish things all throughout your life, right? But sometimes the things you go through in the midst of doing that can have psychological effects on you. That is it anything in the documentary maybe where they're touching on how they were able to overcome mentally some of this stuff, or therapy, what?
Well, I will just say that you will see, we recorded recently an interview with Otis Sistruck, former Raider. And, he doesn't speak with the highest degree of delight about the NFL. You know, they were telling me NFL stands for not for long.
Not for long.
And they were talking about what it was like. As much as you were striving, as much as you had brought your game, there were a lot of other factors besides just your athletic ability that would allow you to advance or not. So the players have a lot to say, not only about like what it might be in terms of trauma, but also constructive resilience.
Wow.
Like, how do we overcome this
Right.
so that we can continue? And I think that's really the Black story, if there is one.
That's real, and like you said, pulling from something. Like, I feel like in life sometimes we look at one thing and then we think life is just about that one thing.
Yeah.
And I think if we start thinking in purpose, like even like you have so many players, it's like even the young athletes now, it's like I want to go to the league, I want to go to the league, but like you said, not for long. What is your true purpose? And like, how are you going to touch people when their playing career is done? And are you, y'all heard her, she said read. You have to read because it's some form of education that you have to take it to another level, you know?
Yeah. We should be deeply curious about the world around us, right? And ways in which we can make it better. A lot of times people are really hung up on the idea, I can't change the government. I can't change the school system. I can't change the healthcare system. But then they're overlooking, in my own neighborhood, I actually can control how healthy people are, how well the children can read, things like that. But, in many cases, people see it as being advantageous to make you feel powerless. Right. And I think a lot of As If We Were Ghosts is about people finding their own empowerment and then moving forward.
I love that. And do you think so when athletes and people, let me ask you this documentary, you feel like it's going to touch everybody, like of all walks of life?
I think there's a story in there for everyone. So if I'm very young, some of these things are unknown to me. So I would bring a child, 3, 4, 5 years old to watch As If We Were Ghosts because they haven't yet even gotten to the point where they're studying about segregation and some of these things.
Right.
So as I'm moving a little bit older and even entering adolescence, I, perhaps as a Black child, but even as a white, Asian, Latino, whatever, I'm beginning to feel some of the social forces, right? So I look to these heroes, if you will, and I say, wow, I can see myself in this story, whether or not I'm an athlete or not. And then, of course, as we move into young adults, these are stories in many cases that haven't been told. And so it opens up. You've seen so much young adult interest in Black lives, right? And this is yet another extension of that. And then for people pushing into my parents' generation, many of these athletes are the athletes of their youth. So to see an Otis Sistruck, to see a Walt Frazier, they watched the games when they were live, and they were rooting for these guys because there were so few Black faces in these places. So I think really there is something in As If We Were Ghosts for everyone.
That's good. So let me ask you this. So location-wise, like when you were traveling, doing the documentary, is there any special places that you went through in Georgia that maybe you learned something about that maybe you didn't know at first? Or like tell us a little bit about the experience of when you were doing your producing work, going to the locations and stuff
Absolutely.
like that.
Well, every place I go in Georgia, for the most part, I mean, I was born on the West Coast, so I've been learning about Georgia as the past 30 years here. And every location, the people are able to bring out more of the stories, not just what's happening on the field, but also off the field. You know, how is it that in some of these small towns, Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. stopped by and gave them a bit of kudos at a diner one day?
Oh, man, that's big.
How is it that in some of these places, like the cheerleaders were being cared for even in the community? So the Black athletic experience didn't just stop with football and basketball. In many cases, it's also how is the band, being cared for? How are the cheerleaders being raised up? And I was amazed, to see how the families really took care of these things. The school system wasn't providing any funding for any of this, and the families were not wealthy. But they would say, we make sure that all of the children, all of the teenagers are cared for. And so whatever we have to do, we actually do it.
I love that. So did you interview through, because I ain't gonna lie to y'all, I'm trying to give y'all a little scoop to build it up, but so any coach, where did you get to interview any Black coaches? Because this is what I noticed still to this day. I saw yesterday, I think on ESPN, it was like it's maybe one black NFL coach left, and I'm kind of like, how was that, like, through your interviews, were there a lot of black coaches back then that got, or like, how was that?
Well, of course, because it was segregated, all the coaches were black.
Oh,
right?
okay, at the schools, yeah.
But let me tell you a little something about desegregation, and this is what some of the coaches told us.
Okay.
So they were at the top of their game in integration, and some of them coaching at the high school level or even going on to the HBCUs. Integration meant that these award-winning top coaches, if they were hired, they would be hired as assistant coaches. No longer could a black man expect to be a head coach any longer.
Wow.
So a lot of their stories have to do with that. And what decisions that they made, many of them to get out of coaching at that point and to pursue other areas. Because they were like, why am I second fiddle? This guy is not even as good as I am, as our team is, but he's white. And therefore, he's naturally going to be the head coach.
Wow. I love that. So is there anything, though, you believe that the viewers can grasp from this documentary that you think would help their life moving forward, in the sense of, like, what is something when they see this, right? They see it live, it's like, whoa, like, this is going to help me move forward in my progression in life.
Yeah. I think as much as you can broaden the story of who African Americans are, you benefit the nation. You know, at the community that I grew up in and the church that I went to is called Wose, and they used to give a historical.
What is that? You got to break that down. Wose.
Taking us back in time to ancient Egypt and the fact that all knowledge derives from these ancient places of learning in ancient Egypt. So, in this particular church, every Sunday, in addition to sermons and prayers and singing, there was something called a historical tribute. And the historical tribute always began by saying, because African history is world history and world history is African history. And then the person would give some account of African or African American, African diasporic history. So to me, the benefit of a project like this is that not everybody got to go to church in the place that I did. And so today, many of these stories still remain obscure. I still hear people speaking about the fact that they don't think that black people have contributed to the emergence of American culture.
What?
Oh yeah, I mean, I was just listening to a New York Times podcast.
How could they? We got the sauce.
That's what I would think as well. I mean, I would think you would look around and you would see examples of this, right?
Right.
But it's not in the schools. So if you look at the books that are being produced, if you look at most of the media that's being produced, it actually doesn't upraise this. In a lot of cases, it upraises, like we said, one extraordinary black person, and everyone believes, well, it was only Harriet Tubman. It was only George Washington Carver. It was only Frederick Douglass. But this isn't true. This excellence that has come across in the arts, in music, in business, in the sciences, I could go on and on and on, has always had an African American presence. And I think As If We Were Ghosts helps to really elevate that and help people to, crystallize that in their minds.
Wow, that's powerful. And like I say, this segment today, y'all, it's all about courage and perseverance. And just being here with N1D Lawson right now, it's a blessing, y'all, because what she's doing, she's pushing the culture forward, and that is what I stand for, and that's what I think you all should stand for at the house. We have to push the culture forward by any means necessary. And so let me ask you this: when can we expect this? Like, do you have a date that it's going to drop, or or it might air? It's just everybody at the house want to know in one. You got to give the people.
Absolutely. Well, it's not a secret. If you go to the website, you will see it. The countdown is there.
Okay.
We're going for Juneteenth.
Oh, Juneteenth.
Yes. For the first time, as you know, last year, the United States recognized this actually as a national day of remembrance. And on the second anniversary of it being a federal holiday, we will plan to launch on Georgia Public Broadcasting and certainly other media outlets as well, the broadcast of As If We Were Ghosts.
Wow, I love that. Okay, and this something else that I was thinking about. So you, like I say, your role as a producer, like, I don't think people understand how hard it is, because it's like you're assembling, a team together, then you're putting a story out there, and then you're trying to make sure everything is just right. So what do you think the hardest part of production was for you? Because I want to tell you at the house, like, what she's doing, y'all, it is not easy. This is a brilliant woman right here, y'all. Brilliant.
Well, you're very, very kind. But you're a producer too, so you have experience with these things, and you also know that depending on the production, what that looks like is different. So when people ask me, for 30 years, what do you do as a producer? Well, it really does vary by production. But I will say, as to your question about the hardest part, I think it is helping teams of people maintain focus, because every story could be told in a myriad of different ways. There isn't like a single storytelling path. So you have to actually, as the producer, determine what that path is and help the team stay on it. Wow. Otherwise, if you notice, you probably have friends who want to be producers, and they work on things for years and years, and you never see any product.
Right. What is that?
For me, I say a producer must make product.
You got to put it out. You can't.
It's in the name.
Right.
And I know it's hard sometimes because we're saying, I want to perfect it. I want to make it. But you know how Miles Davis, the great trumpeter, he would say, don't fear mistakes. There are none. And so at some point, we have to release ourselves from fear. It is not the most perfect production that will ever be, but we have to release it because people need to see the story. Right. So you make a plan and you say, this is what I can carry out given the time frame, given the financial resources and so forth that I have. Right. And then you got to release. And I honestly, working with many, many up-and-coming young Black producers, my biggest frustration is them holding on to product. Years later, they keep coming back. They say, N1, I'm still working. And I said, brother, in the time that you've been working on this one, I've done 10 things. Now, my 10 things, to be sure, maybe they are not the most perfect 10 things, but you can always keep perfecting. Once we release as if we were ghosts at Juneteenth, we might get some feedback and we decide there's another segment, or let's re-edit it this way, or let's put out another.
She's giving game, y'all.
We're going to put the product out there.
She's giving game, y'all. Put your work out there, man. Stop. And that is so true. Like, I always have friends that like, is this, I got all this and that, and it's like, where is it?
Yeah.
Where is it?
That's what I'm saying.
Okay, y'all, we got a special guest coming in.
It's the man of the hour.
The man of the hour, Mr. Ron Bivens. Look.
Give it up.
Look,
give it up.
I was holding out in N1D. That game, though, N1D just dropped, y'all. That was major.
Please come
Mr. Ron Bivens in the house, y'all. Come on.
Now we can really do a show. You're looking good.
How you doing, Mr. Ron?
Hey, how are you, Mr.
Yes.
How are you?
So look, y'all, once again, to bring you all back, we are live at Oursstudio podcast, where we stream your podcast and you watch ours. I am your host, ATL E-Rob. I'm here with N1D Lawson, and I am here with Mr. Ron Bivens. Let me tell y'all a little bit something about Mr. Ron Bivens, y'all. Look, he is the owner of Oursstudio. He has done real estate all throughout the nation. He is a businessman, a mogul, and he has enough business to give to your auntie, your uncle, your cousin, your sister, your brother, your nieces, your uncles, everybody. But anyway, this is Mr. Ron. How you feel, Mr. Ron?
I'm good. How are you all today?
We're good.
Wonderful.
Give Mr. Ron, just give them a little background of who you are, and then we'll talk about your role and as if we were ghosts.
Okay, well, I'm originally from South Georgia, Americus, Georgia. Came to Atlanta in 1970.
Okay.
I left Americus during the 69-70, before the integration actually took place, because the actual integration for the public school started in Americus, Georgia in 1970. Wow. And I had just got out of high school. And came to Atlanta, came to Morris Brown. I played baseball, and I went out on the football thing. I was over there at the same time when Alfred Jenkins was there.
Okay.
And from there, after I finished Morris Brown, I went into real estate. Nice. And I had a great mentor, a gentleman by the name of Carter Coleman. Mm-hmm. He taught me business law at Morris Brown. Mm-hmm. And he kind of took me under his wings and asked me one day when I was coming to class, I was always a couple of minutes late coming to the class because I was working at night and going to school full-time and working full-time at night at Morris Brown. And he said, son, let me ask you a question. He said, you're a pretty good student, but why are you late coming to my class? You know, I said, well, Mr. Coleman, he said, you got a family? I said, no, son, I'm just tired of being poor. And he said, oh, you think you might be interested in real estate? And at the time, that was in the early 70s. And I said, what's real estate? You know, I said, I didn't, you know, coming from South Georgia, Americas, that kind of thing. So he said, come by my office one day. And on a Saturday, we did giving a class. You think you might be interested in it? Just come by there and see. So when I went over there, I'll never forget the gentleman by the name of Roger Kane. He was teaching the class, and he told us that day, he say, let me tell y'all, boys, something. Y'all gonna be making so much money that your pocket's gonna look like they got the mumps. So that's all I need to hear at that time, you know. So, and I found out later on that Roger Kane had really never ever sold a house. But he was a motivator, you know.
He had a good mouthpiece.
Oh yeah, he was motivated. So I ended up getting my real estate license. And the first house I ever sold, I never forget, was for $12,500. Wow. I made $700. I thought I was rich.
Awesome. Profit is profit.
You know, I thought I was rich, you know. So the story goes on, and I had an opportunity to, because of Mr. Coleman, his relationship with so many influential people in Atlanta, I was able to worked with Henry Aaron. Hank Aaron was one of my clients.
Awesome.
And Mrs. Aaron, when I got out of school and I had a house I wanted to buy, and I told Mr. Coleman about it, and he said, maybe Billy might let you have the money. So he contacted her, and she lent me $5,000 to buy a house. Wow. And the whole house was $5,000. I had $5,000 for the whole house. So I paid her money back, and, you know, and the rest of it history. As a matter of fact, I sold the house that her and Hank was living in on it was Hunter Street at the time.
Okay, I remember Hunter Street. I ain't
Hunter Street.
Yeah, I know.
And I sold that house, and then they moved out to Adams Drive. And the dining room set that they had in that house, it was a very nice dining room set. And I had a little apartment, 1-bedroom apartment, and literally, they gave it to me because they sold it to them for $300.
Wow.
I have nowhere to put it, so it's still in my sister's house right now.
Wow.
My sister had a house, so she had that dining room set ever since then. So after that, I went to work, like I said, after I got my license with Mr. Coleman, and I worked with him for about 7 or 8 years, and he told me it was time to probably expand because I got my insurance license. I did a whole lot of things like that. I managed apartments. I had offices throughout the state of Georgia, in Albany, Columbus, Atlanta. And I ended up...
I told y'all he got enough for your whole family. I told you.
And I ended up, with real estate and insurance. I had at one time the largest black real estate insurance company in the whole state.
Wow.
So we ended up with what they call the Empire Real Estate Board, which was the black organization, which is the National Association of Real Estate Brokers. Okay. There's a difference between the realtors and what they call a realtors. A lot of people don't understand it, but the realtors was the organization that was formed by minorities as for black people because we couldn't be a realtor at that time. So we ended up joining all the various organizations eventually once integration fully took place in the United States. But the Empire Real Estate Board still exists. I'm a member of the Empire Real Estate Board still, and I'm also a realtor, but I'm a commercial realtor because I specialize in nothing but commercial properties.
Awesome.
And also my wife have a child development center on Rainbow Drive called Rainbow Academy of Learning. It's my wife's center. And she's had it for about 13, 14 years. But she's retired from the federal government. She worked for Congress for about 38 years. And after she retired, she went over to the daycare center. And she enjoyed it. And as a matter of fact, I have to run her from over there sometime. Because she really enjoyed working with the kids. And our whole thing is it's all about the children. And what our whole philosophy is that we don't want people leaving out our community, going anywhere else because of quality. Right. She's had the the governor, Sandra Dill, to come out and read books to our kids, as well as the commissioner, Amy Jacobs. Awesome. And they use our center as a pilot before they implement other programs to other centers in the state of Georgia. So it's been one of those situations where my wife has done a fantastic job, and because she's a CPA by trade, she's not an educator, but she's taken on the role of making sure that we have a quality education system in South DeKalb.
That's awesome.
And this is like an example of what we were talking earlier about as if we were ghosts, and the fact that this kind of black excellence emerges across a whole range, right? So the state of Georgia is learning about early childhood development from a center here in the black community.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. So Mr. Run, tell the people at the house a little bit about your role in As If We Were Ghosts.
Okay, As If We Were Ghosts.
Let them know.
This is what happened. A gentleman by the name of Herb White. As a matter of fact, I had talked with N1D years ago. You probably never remember, but I called because I remember when they were advertising it about 12, 15 years ago.
Herb must be a good dude. This is my second time hearing his name. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, Herb White, he played high school ball at Decatur High School.
Okay.
Went on to the University of Georgia in Athens and graduated there, played ball there. And he also played for the Atlanta Hawks when Pistol Pete was there and people like that.
Right?
Yeah.
See, I know a little something.
So what happened is that Herb told me that when he was playing high school ball, he would play during the summers at the Black Recreation Center in downtown Decatur. I think they called it Trinity or something.
We
like
called
that.
the Matchbox back in the day.
Back in those days. And he
See, I don't
said
know nothing about that.
that he played ball with the black guys over there. And when he went back to Decatur High School, he said those guys couldn't tie his shoes. He was so good.
Wow.
He said that he had learned so much playing with the black kids over there that was unreal. He said, but there were several black kids, number of black kids that was much better than him, but never got the opportunity because of the segregation era. And he just said that he thought that story needed to be told. So he, I guess, presented it. I think the one who used that PBS when all this started to happen. And he presented it. And the biggest problem he had, I think, they couldn't fund it, couldn't get all the funding, of something. And it just fell to the wayside. So Herb and I stayed in touch with each other from all those years. And Herb and I talked not too long ago, and before we got involved with this, and I said maybe it's time to resurrect this particular documentary. Right. So I got in touch with the people at Georgia Public Broadcasting, and I worried them to death.
See, if you want something, y'all, you got to worry them to death. Perseverance, yeah. That's our theme for today.
I probably sent 10, 15 emails from the president to the CEO to whoever it was. Right. So finally, someone reached back out to me and wanted to know, well, what is it that you want, this. And so I went through the whole thing, and I sent them a long email about why and how and what we proposed to do. Right. So lo and behold, Keosha Howard was, I guess she was over-programmed. She got in touch with me and was really elated that I wanted to complete this documentary. Right. So what they did, they gave me access to their server to download all the footage that they had originally done. So I got that, and lo and behold, when I started looking through all the footage, one person's name kept popping up over all the documents.
And who was that?
That was Miss Lawson, the one. I said, wait a minute. I said, I've got to find who this is. So I went on the internet, started searching, and I found a phone number. So I called, and I didn't say why I called. I just said, I have a production that I want you to, look at for me. So, maybe a day, maybe passed or so, and then the one that called me. And I told her what I was talking about. And she was pleasantly surprised.
I was really surprised.
Very
surprised.
Yeah.
Tearfully surprised.
Yeah. And I said, the reason I got in touch with you was because you were the person that I saw all over this documentary, you know, the name and papers and everything else. And I found eventually you were the person that had interviewed Walt Frazier also. And I asked her, I said, well, what about N1D? He said she would be super to get involved with this project, okay? And I can't think of the other basketball player I played with the Hawks. Him and I talked, Glenn. I can't think of Glenn's last name right offhand, but I talked to several different people. Then he also mentioned Becky Taylor, also the lady that's
Becky Taylor's down at the Tipton Gazette, so she is you'll probably have to talk to her on the podcast one day.
For sure.
She's got a wealth of information about GIA, segregated sports leagues.
So all of that came down, and when N1D got involved, we talked, and we were able to work out how we were going to try to move forward. And you know, I didn't have a clue, you know, on this because my background is not this, but I have a passion for history, especially black history. And I was a part of the GIA.
I was going to say, he should mention he's also a GIA athlete, not just a businessman.
Wow.
So.
Yeah.
How was that? Tell them a little bit about how was that being a GIA athlete?
Well, what happened is that just recently on ABC Evening News, Deborah Roberts featured the Houston County football team that won the championship in 1969.
Wow.
Okay? And we played them, and we tied them 14-14. And we would have played them for the championship game, but we lost to Wilson High School 18-8. And they lost to Wilson, but Wilson lost to Houston County when they played for the state championship. And we would have been in the state championship that year had we not lost to Wilson. But we did tie the state champions. They was undefeated, but they had a tie. You know, and I was the quarterback for my high school team.
Did you have an arm, though?
Yeah, I could. I always laugh.
Would you like a pocket pass or would you
No,
like...
well, I was a rollout passer.
Okay.
But the funny part about it, I always tell my friends when they see me, you know, because when I came to Morris Brown, I was short, you know, and didn't have a lot of weight and stuff either. So that was one of my biggest problems as far as making the team at Morris Brown was because Morris Brown was a drop back situation. They had these taller guys and things like that. But I would always tell my buddies when we laugh and talk that, man, I could stand in the end zone and throw the ball from one end of the
to
field
the other.
To the other end of the
You
field,
still got it?
Flat-footed. You know, so we always laugh. You know, but I did have a pretty good arm. I played baseball. I played third base. And I was a pitcher when I was there. In Little League ball, I was a pitcher, but I threw my arm away because we didn't have good balls. All our balls were heavy, dead. You know, we played with one ball, and we never had good equipment. We got hand-me-down equipment. Everything we got during that era was hand-me-down. Now, for us to get a low-cut pair of football cleats, you had to be special. Now, I don't even know what they even make high-top football cleats anymore. But that was the truth, you know, and I have to always laugh about the GIA because our helmets, our colors was maroon and white. And you know the tape that they used to wrap your ankles with before the game? We didn't have stripes on our helmets. So one of our players, a guy by the name of Sonny Allen, he told us, he said, man, he said, everybody else got stripes on their helmet, and we don't have them. So he got the tape that you tape your ankles with and put them on, and all of us had white stripes on our helmets at the next game that we played. You know, so we improvised.
Ron, I was going to mention something that's important about what you're sharing about the GIA, and it has to do with facilities. So we know about segregated schools from the perspective that you're getting hand-me-down books. We've seen the images, black students using a book that was 10 years ago, written in, pages intentionally ripped out so they couldn't study everything.
Right.
Well, don't think it was different in the athletic leagues, right? They're not receiving any first-hand equipment, nor are the facilities. When you see, like, Herb White's story about the Matchbox, this actually begins because one of the players from the black part of town who played in the Matchbox, a place where the floor was made of cement, They didn't have any wood, nothing down there. So he decided one day on a Wednesday night, because it was raining and that's the day that they had Bible study. And so he thought it would be safe maybe to go up to Decatur's main gym up the hill. Today, if you go to downtown Decatur, you can still see these locations. They recently tore down the Matchbox and made it into that like new city center. And up the hill, you can see the old gym, which is now the new recreation center.
Wow.
But on that Wednesday night, Letus Bankston, a black player, walked up the hill and decided to play on the wood. He wanted to play on a wood floor. So he takes the floor. The white players have never seen a black player, but there's few there, so he figured, probably wouldn't get beat down too bad.
Yeah.
But then he's throwing up jump shot. They've never seen anything like that. What's a breakaway jumper?
Right.
So they take him in and they start learning. So that's how Herb begins this exchange program, if you will, where he goes down the hill to the Matchbox and begins to learn to dunk. And you can see, if you look at Herb's, record and what he was able to do, he will tell you, I learned that with those players from the Matchbox.
Wow.
Nevertheless, when it was time for them to apply to college, as I mentioned earlier, there's no access to the University of Georgia for any black player at that time.
Oh,
At that time, they called him the elevator from Decatur.
Elevator from Decatur. That's crazy.
that was his nickname.
So, Mr. Ron, how do you feel? Like, because I know you were the infrastructure, like your generation pretty much laid the foundation for today. So, how do you feel like the overall progress of everything that's moving forward? Do you feel like the progress is being made? Like, how are you with the changes of today?
Well, I think that changes have been made, but I think that a lot of times the younger people now, sometimes I don't think they really realize the struggles that happen and the people that came before them. And this is the thing that I want to emphasize, is that there's a lot of shoulders that they're riding on. People that nobody know who they are, but they were very instrumental in them being able to get the big bucks today. You had a few people like Walt Frazier, Blue Moon Odom, Rayfield Wright, and all those people that slipped through the cracks, but they was far and in between. But there were some players, even Walt Frazier admitted, that was better than him.
Wow.
Right
and that he looked up to. There were heroes in the community. And in the same voice, I can see that in my hometown and other people that we played against. My whole thing is that we had bands, we had cheerleaders, we had all the things, and we were happy with what we had because we made out with what we had to deal with.
Absolutely.
And in my hometown, civil rights movement, they have the something kind of civil rights movement, very instrumental. John Lewis, Hosea Williams, all those people were there, and because we were right next to Albany, Georgia.
Yeah.
Wow.
So what fed in Albany also fed in us. In America's, and it was done when Lyndon Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act and everything. Americus was one of those cities that in Georgia that they targeted because it was majority black.
Okay.
So they went to register people in Americus because it was a majority black town. But every official there that was in office was white. So that was a hotbed. And Martin Luther King in his book said the meanest man he ever met in his life was not Bull Connor and those people they talk about. It was the sheriff named Fred Chappell in my hometown.
In America.
In America. I say he was the meanest man he ever met in his life.
So that's big. You being from there and bringing this to light with N1D and As If We Were Ghosts. How do you feel like people will take this? Like, what do you want the message to be when people watch As If We Were Ghosts?
Well, I think that my biggest thing is exposure, to let the people know we've come a long way, so we still have a long ways to go. The biggest thing is to let the athletes know that give back to the communities
I like that.
that help you to get where you are. Don't forget where you came from.
That's real.
And I grew up in the housing projects in Americus, Georgia. I'm a housing project person. Okay, when I got out of high school. And I can say this, I had an opportunity to go to West Point and was scared to death to go because I had never been to school with white people and didn't think I could compete. And my teachers couldn't tell me, even my coaches or none of those people, because at the time they were handpicking blacks to go to those type of institutions.
Right.
And I came up to Atlanta to something they called Georgia Boys State. It's now it's Woodward Academy.
College.
It used to be called
Okay.
Georgia Military Academy. So the American Legion picked some people in the community, and I was one of the people they picked to come up to Atlanta for I don't know how long, maybe a week or 2 or 3 weeks, whatever. So evidently I must have did pretty good.
You did.
Because the next thing I know, this Congressman Jack Brinkley, who was there, the Mr. Blunt, who was over the American Legion, he contacted me and said that you think you might want to go to West Point.
Wow.
And I say, I had never been basically out of Americas, okay? So I was scared to leave there because I didn't think I could compete, because they always would say that the other race was smarter, and we always got the hand-me-down. And the only reason that I found out later, that reasons that we had problems like that is because of exposure. We were never exposed to some of the things that the other race was exposed to.
I love that.
They could go to, we read about Europe, but they've been to Europe. We read about Washington, D.C. They work in Washington, D.C.
Right.
I used to always wonder those offices in America. I see people in America working in offices. I wonder how they made money. Okay, that always bothered me. I say, how they making money? Because all the people I know in America, they work construction. They did manual labor.
Right.
So that's what was in my mind all those years until I really got to Atlanta and got exposed
I love that.
to what business was all
I
about.
love that. So, and Wendy, do you feel like it's anything else that you all want to touch on as we wrap up this segment on As If We Were Ghosts podcast?
Well, I mean, I can only just, kind of echo what Ron is saying. That is the significance of this.
Right.
Exposure is key. And as long as these stories are kept in the realm of ghosts, outside of our actual vision, we're not going to be able to advance. You're always going to have people thinking, we're less than, we never contributed anything, we aren't worth anything. It was very interesting. One of our shoots, we were at Booker T. Washington High School here in Atlanta. And as we were wrapping up, a group of gentlemen, young men who go to the school came by. It was a holiday. And so they were first kind of jumping in the shot and saying a few things or whatnot. And then I encouraged the subject to talk with them a little bit, and we just kept rolling. So they were telling us, this school ain't nothing. This is not, da-da-da. So he was explaining that he had played at this school when it was the champion school in Atlanta.
Right.
He went on, he was talking about he said, and you realize Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. graduated from this school. And the boys stopped and said, Martin Luther King went to this school? That was very sad to me, that nobody has been impressing that on these young men. They're standing under a statue of Booker T. Washington himself, and they are going to a school that Martin Luther King Jr. graduated from, and they're saying, we aren't worth nothing. This school isn't worth.
Yeah.
So we have to tell these stories in order to really uplift the people to who we actually are.
I love that. I love that. So to wrap up this first episode of As If We Were Ghosts, I want to thank N1D Lawson and Mr. Ron Bivens for coming behind the scenes with us and sharing their culture and sharing their decision making in this process of As If We Were Ghosts. I am your host, Eric Roberts, better known as ATL EROB, and this is the first episode of As If We Were Ghosts. I want you all to think about this moving forward. Anybody out there who has a goal and a dream, just think. Just keep pushing forward. As we said today, courage and perseverance. You must keep fighting, keep pushing through. And like I always tell y'all, I believe in me, and I believe in you. You all can find this first episode on all streaming platforms, as well as EROBTV and Oursstudio. I want to shout out to Oursstudio once again and EROBTV for producing this. Thank you all for coming behind the scenes.
Thank you for having us.
What a pleasure.
All right, and I want y'all to point right there. You can follow me on Instagram at ATL_EROB. And remember to visit my website at EROB.TV, as well as Oursstudio.com. Okay.
You can check in with me at Virtue.
gotta focus on yourself, on your faith, on your dreams, on your mind, on your health, yeah. You gotta work, never tell